Okay, so in this class, we're going to talk about intervallic harmony by fourths. This sixth lesson is the first time we're talking about harmony limited only to fourths. But as we said in the previous lesson, fourths exist in two varieties. They're perfect fourths and augmented fourths. So we can do it either way. We can do harmony limited to just perfect fourths or harmony permitting both perfect and augmented fourths. We'll be looking at both of those. This kind of harmony, intervallic harmony, which can also be done, of course, with harmony by seconds or by sixths and so on, as we will see in later lessons, okay? This harmony is a great way to give you quite a variety of texture within a definitely coherent overall sound. Let's look at the details. There are two basic kinds of intervallic harmony in the case of fourths. One of them I would call pure. In other words, this is harmony using only the perfect fourth and maybe the perfect fifth, but no variation in quality. In other words, no tritones here. Okay, now if you do this kind of harmony, which stays entirely in one quality of interval, the thing is you can't stick to any one diatonic scale because diatonic scales have semitones in various places, and the semitones are going to force you into having tritones at times. So this tends to be useful for a fairly short pass, and it can't stick in one simple diatonic scale. Okay, how can we manage this? Well, despite having no variation in quality, in other words, apart from maybe no variation apart from perfect fourth and perfect fifth, okay, we can still get a certain amount of independence and interest because we can arrange the doubling and also how many notes we have in the chord, okay? However, the thing that we have to notice is that because the intervals are equidistant, the harmony tends to sound rootless. Because it's rootless, you can't use the effect of root progression to create any kind of sense of cadence. That means that the counterpoint between the outer voices has an enormous influence on the direction. Cadence is usually the result of texture, linear definition, and rhythm in this kind, since we can't reduce interval tension. Okay, if it's harmony used in two parts, it's pretty simple. It's sort of like organum, just parallel lines doubled in fourths or fifths. Occasionally you can arrange it so that the voices go in contrary motion, but like for example, I could go from the fourth C-F to the fourth F-B flat by adding an octave in between, but still the quality doesn't change much. All that does, it gives me the possibility of having a bit of variety in the kind of motion in the lines. I can also skip a note and vary the number of notes, as we'll see in example 1A in a moment. Okay, if you look at 1A, let's listen to it now. As we can see in example 1A, all the chords are perfect fourth chords. A few little techniques to make it a little more flexible. The first one doubles the same note in the right hand to the left hand. The second chord, the B flat in the second chord, acts like a sort of big neighbor note to the E flat. Notice that also forms a fourth with the rest of the chord. Same thing in the third beat. Then in the second bar, I'm doubling a note in the right hand. I'm doubling a note from the chord in the right hand. Same thing in the last beat. And the last chord is just a pile of fourths. So even though these are all perfect fourths, by using these little extra methods, you can find ways to make the lines more interesting. Let's listen to that again. If we allow inversion of the chords, so obviously inverting a perfect fourth gives you a fifth, okay? Inverting two perfect fourths might give us a fourth and a fifth, or two perfect fifths. So if we allow inversion, the character is still pretty strong, but it allows for more real counterpoint. Let's look at example 1B. Here it is. You've probably noticed that example 1B is the same melody as 1A, but the harmony is arranged a little differently. How did I do that? Well, bottom note B flat, next note E flat, then the F. Well, the F actually could have been the F below the B flat, except by inverting it, I put it in upper voice. So what it does here is it gives me more variety of spacing. Instead of, it gives me more possibility for moving the lines around. This one over here, again, it's A, E, and D. Well, actually, that's E, A, D, but inverted into a fifth chord. Using fourths on top. Then, same thing over here. Okay, the F to E flat. By having the B flat on top instead of in the middle, gives us a different spacing. And it finishes the same way the first one did, except the last chord now is also inverted. So since it's all perfect fifths, there's still a certain transparency to the harmony. There's not much in the way of semitones here that really stick out, but it gives us more variety in the way we can do the lines. Let's listen to 1B again. The second way to do harmony by fourths is what we can call scale-based. Whereas in the first kind, with the pure fourths, it couldn't fit a diatonic scale. Here we do the opposite. Here we start from the scale. We accept that some chords are going to give us tritones and others will give us perfect fourths. But there's still enough limitation that it makes it fairly coherent. Okay? So the interval qualities in the chords will vary, and that means that we can use those tritones, and as we shall see, the seconds which result, to create accent within the phrase, and that's a useful thing. So the character is left definite, but there's more variety, and this kind of harmony can be used for a longer passage. Let's listen to 1C. As we can see in 1C, we start off the same way, but now we have a tritone at the bottom of the chord. Here it's perfect fourths again. Then for the climax of the phrase, not only do I have a tritone, but one of the notes of the tritone is doubled, and it also gives us a major seventh with the bass. So this chord is by far the most tense in the whole exercise. And for the cadence, we go back to fourths and fifths, more open sound. So you can see that this kind of variety, and in this, by the way, in this case, it all fits within a D-flat major or a B-flat minor scale. This kind of variety gives us more expressive potential, more expressive variety. It's quite useful. As we said, cadence is easier in this kind of harmony because of the variety of intervals. Notice, however, that the more notes we have in the chord, the less inversion really matters, because the more notes you have, the more possibilities there are. For example, if I take a chord going all the way up the keyboard in perfect fourths, I could eventually get all 12 notes of the scale. Is anybody really going to pretend that this is the same chord as this? Because they both contain the same notes. Obviously, in this case, nobody's going to hear that second chord as a chord in fourths. That's a cluster. So again, watch out about the idea of inversion. You have to be careful you don't lose the character completely. The third kind of harmony I want to talk about with harmony in fourths, which is sort of a derivation of the others. It's not really entirely independent. It's scale-based, but all we're doing is, now we're going to allow passing and neighboring sonorities. Exactly like in classical harmony when we have ornamental notes. Ornamental notes can ornament these harmonies too. So let's listen to example 2. In example 2, we see we start off with fourths, then we have a fifth and a fifth, but the harmony in between is a sixth. Then we have a chord which combines a tritone and a fifth, and then a chord in fourths. So we can see that the chord at the second half of the first bar still has fifths prominently in the spacing, even though there's an interval that isn't a fifth. And where does that C, by the way, come from the middle? It's a neighbor note to the B flat in the first chord. The second half, okay, this is fifths and fourths. Here we have a seventh chord, but it's used as a sort of passing chord between this and this. So this one here has fourths, but it also contains a third in the middle that resolves in the final chord. So this is basically not doing anything terribly different from classical harmony in terms of ornamental notes, except instead of doing it around chords in thirds, we're doing it around chords in fourths. Now let's listen to example 3. In example 3, again, the basic harmony is built in fifths and fourths, and tritones as well sometimes, but occasionally there'll be a chord which has sort of passing elements. For example, if I look at the first bar, So far, fifths and fourths. Now I go to this. Well, that could still be fourths. But then this is a chord in fifths and fourths, but look what happens now. It almost lasts like the previous one is an appoggiatura, but then we go back to fourths. However, the sound of the third, which we heard in that little dissonance, however, the sound of the third, which you heard in the previous beat, now is part of the chord. So it makes something that in another context would be just a plain old seventh chord, but here it resolves onto chord in fourths. Again, what we saw before, fifth and fifth separated by a sixth. Now with fourths including tritones. Fourths, but with a third in the middle between the E and the G sharp, then again fourth. So this, as you can see, opens the door very wide to all kinds of other possibilities. Well, it's quite clear when we listen to the whole thing that the basic harmonic sound is fourths and fifths, just like in classical music, the bass sound is third. In this case, the ornamentation allows us to get in other kinds of sonorities. And when you think about how much non-harmonic tones added to classical harmony, you can see that the same kind of potential is available here, which means that it's very useful for composing longer pieces because it's not so limiting that you can't do anything that your ear tells you to do in a specific place.